Hi everyone, welcome to or back to episode 21 for She Who Hears. As always, I want to try to keep this short and sweet for you guys, but I'm going to let God do as He sees fit in this atmosphere. I'm going to be reading from Exodus chapter 3, verses 2 through 6. And it says, There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in the flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. Verse 4, when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. When God calls Moses to go back to Egypt to free the Hebrews, Moses tries to convince God to use his brother Aaron instead, because the Hebrews wouldn't have accepted Moses because he was raised as an Egyptian when they were enslaved, and Moses, in their eyes and Moses' eyes, would have been the better choice because they would have trusted him more and looked up more to Aaron. So Moses tries to convince God or give him excuses as to why he should be the one that God chooses for this mission. He was a murderer, he had slow speech, he just didn't think he was the one that God could do what he was calling him to do. Because when you've been in a low place, when you decide to count yourself out and leave your past behind, you've convinced yourself that you can't go any higher than that low place. But God was not convinced of this. God tells Moses to tell the Egyptians and the Hebrews that I am has sent you. God is telling Moses that he can no longer look down on himself because I am selected you for higher and better. But that eventually brought me to my question of, why a burning bush? Why wasn't it a burning tree or a burning branch from a tree? Why specifically had to be a bush? And when I thought about the differences between a tree and a bush, I immediately thought of how a tree is taller and bigger than a bush. But when you think about how a bush, despite how low to the ground it is, it can be easily overlooked. But a bush doesn't take as long to grow. A bush can produce its fruit faster than a tree. When I did some research on the differences between a tree and a bush, the instant thing that stuck out to me was an example of gardening. A tree is, beautiful. It's aesthetically pleasing to the eye. But a bush can be used to fill in gaps between trees and flowers and wherever else is in the garden. God decided that Moses had more than enough time to produce and change and develop. He had more than enough time to become who God wanted him to become, and God said it was time to come forth. Moses was the bush that God wanted to use to fill in the gap between him and his people, to take his children from that enslaved low place to a place flowing with milk and honey for the descendants of Abraham, to who he promised would be as numerous as the sand and as numerous as the stars in the sky. This is what it all was for. And even though Moses couldn't enter the promised land after all that took place, God told Moses to go up to the mountain to see the promised land, where he could finally see why all was worth it. Moses had to see the promise from a higher place. Isn't that why Zacchaeus climbed the fig tree to see Jesus, our promise? Isn't that why Jesus, before going to the cross, he told the Father, "Forgive them, for they do not understand what they are doing"? God had to use the prophets and teachers to fill in the gap for his communication and guidance for us. And Jesus came so there was no longer a gap. God wrapped himself in flesh, so there was no longer a gap. And Jesus took a death that was supposed to be ours, so that we could have the Holy Spirit, so there can no longer be a gap. Moses probably couldn't fully understand the mission, especially after he and the Hebrews had to wander in the wilderness, but he had to hold on to the worth of it. It was confusing, but it was worth it. It was uncomfortable and frustrating, but it was worth it. That burning bush was a symbol to us and Moses that yes, it was a low place, but God can fill you with hope and expectation to move to higher and greater. God will fill you with a burning passion for a mission beyond your understanding. Now you won't be able to function properly if you don't do it. The prophet Jeremiah said that the word of the Lord becomes like a fire that was shut up in his bones, that he had to lay it out. It became a passion. We'll start off with just a conversation, filled Moses with passion to move forward for the mission. And it was worth it in the end. And before I end this episode, I want to invite you guys to my family's church. Whether you're in the Maryland area or you don't mind the drive, I would love to invite you to Reformation Life Center. It is my church home. It is a beautiful place. I love that church, I do. And I would love to invite you guys there. I also do want to invite you guys to an event that we're having December 28th. It is an evening of us bragging about our God, on just talking about how good God's been to us. And I also wrote a skit that we're going to be performing for that evening. So I would love for you guys to come out and enjoy that with us. And I will leave all of that with you guys. Thank you.